Thanks, Chairman, and good morning. It's great to see you all. As you know, the purpose of this session is to reflect on your deliberations in June, and there's a bit of revision involved as well, I think, in case we are rusty after the summer break, and I certainly know that I am. Breed has addressed some issues around powers and functions, and I'm going to talk to you about a few miscellaneous matters that have arisen in your discussions. That will pave the way after a short break for us to unleash Derek on you to present thoughts on structure. My twin aims are to be brief and straightforward. As a great admirer of Catherine Cecil Thurston, the Cork novelist best known for political thrillers, I sometimes reflect on her words, and she noted, "No weapons are more potent than brevity and simplicity," and I am nothing if not simple. The two big mountains that you have to scale concern powers and structures. Everything else realistically flows from there. That is not to say that the issues that I will talk about are unimportant, but it is vital to get the balance right. Your main job, as the Chairman outlined earlier, is to point the government in a direction regarding a directly elected mayor for Dublin. Yes, God may be in the detail, but many of those details will be ironed out by central government politicians and senior civil servants. So you don't have to fill in every blank space, and you are not drafting legislation here. One persistent question which has been lingering since weekend one and which cropped up again in the most recent facilitators report is, should there be a plebiscite of the people of Dublin before the role is formally established? A plebiscite is a direct vote of all of the members of an electorate on an important public question, essentially in this instance a local referendum. In your final Assembly report, you are of course fully entitled to recommend a plebiscite. You might do so on the grounds that it is democratic to ask Dubliners the simple question as to whether they want a directly elected mayor, yes or no. You might also argue for a plebiscite on the grounds of consistency, because these local ballots took place in Cork, Limerick and Waterford in 2019. In those cases, though, the voters may as well have been blindfolded because there was a paucity of information. I am somewhat dubious about the merits of recommending a plebiscite. Over the past 20 years, we have had proposals and even legislation for directly elected mayors. The current government established this Assembly on the basis that Dublin is to have a directly elected mayor, not to ask the question, should we have one? So would we be adding another layer of complexity with a plebiscite? The job at hand, as we know again from the Chairman this morning, sticking with the terms of reference, is to put a framework together based on structures and powers that will facilitate the creation of the Office of DEM in Dublin. Regarding the term of office, the timing of elections and term limits, all of which appeared in your last facilitators report. The Local Government Act of 2001, where we first legislated for directly elected mayors, stated that DEMs would have a 5-year term of office, a significant difference compared to the 1-year terms our Lord Mayors and Mayors currently have. It is proposed that the Limerick directly elected mayor will have a 5-year term. The slight kink there is that if the Mayor of Limerick gets off the ground before the 2024 local elections, then she or he would have an extended first term until the 2029 local elections. Thereafter, the mayoral elections will be on a 5-year cycle consistent with local elections. One of the better reforms of the past 25 years in local government is that local elections are now constitutionally protected and take place in late May, early June every 5 years. And we are on a cycle of 4s and 9s, so 2024, 2029, 2034, 2039, etc. It seems logical to me that the DEM election in Dublin would fit into this cycle. The recommendation in Limerick is that the mayor can serve a maximum of 2 terms of office. I think that is a reasonable proposal for Dublin too. There are obviously arguments against term limits. Back in 1778, Roger Sherman, a founding father of the United States, wrote an open letter stating, "Nothing renders government more unstable than a frequent change of the persons that administer it." But of course, it depends on the quality of those people as well. This leads neatly, in my mind at least, into the whole area of changing the directly elected mayor. In other words, terms that appeared in the facilitator's report to do with recall or indeed impeachment. In March 2019, in advance of the plebiscites in Cork, Limerick and Waterford, the government published what it called detailed policy proposals. It had interesting things to say on this topic and distinguished between the removal of the mayor and the recall of the mayor. So please bear with me because this isn't as straightforward as I would like it to be. The removal of the mayor would be triggered by the elected council. Before we step on this landmine, the governance arrangements supporting the Dublin DEM are not known. Derek will help us tease some of these options out later. For now, let us say that there will be some type of elected council beneath the directly elected mayor, and for mathematical reasons, I'm going to say that it will comprise 24 members. The 2019 proposal said that the resolution to remove the directly elected mayor would have to be passed by not less than 75% of the elected members. That is 18 members in my made-up example. This is only phase 1, however, of a double lock mechanism. The second part is that the minister with responsibility for local government would have to confirm the elected council's decision to remove the mayor or not confirm it. If you are still with me, and I wouldn't blame you if you were not, there is then the recall process, which involves the citizens. So the removal of the mayor doesn't involve the citizens, it's the council with the double lock of the minister. So the recall process. Again, turning to the 2019 proposals, it was stated that a recall process would begin by the elected council passing a resolution with a 2/3 majority to trigger either a recall petition of citizens or a recall plebiscite. So with the petition, and we're getting into numbers again, unfortunately, if 20% of the registered electorate in the area sign a recall petition within a period of 6 weeks of the council resolution, a by-election for mayor is held. Now, the incumbent mayor could, of course, contest that election. If it was the plebiscite option, within 6 weeks of the council resolution, the electorate would be asked to vote in a plebiscite on the removal of the mayor. The recall of the mayor would be triggered if a simple majority was achieved in the plebiscite, but based on a minimum turnout of 40% of the electorate. So, if you were trying to design a system that was as complicated as possible, I think they came up with it quite well. And obviously, if the mayor was recalled, a mayoral election campaign would be scheduled to take place at the earliest possible date after the decision. So we've strayed dramatically, I suppose, from the concept of keeping it simple, so I'll try to get us back on track. In terms of a Citizens' Assembly ballot paper, the question might be asked if it is appropriate to have provisions for the recall or removal of the Dublin directly elected mayor. So that would be the starting point. And if your answer to that question was yes, then potentially you would have fun designing the actual mechanisms. But the first question is whether you think it is appropriate to put in provisions to remove and or recall a directly elected mayor. The mechanisms I've described there from the 2019 proposals each start with a resolution passed by an elected council. It looks like that the Limerick legislation will include the removal of the mayor by way of a 75% threshold of the councillors and confirmation by the minister. It is less clear if any recall provisions by the electorate will be included. Needless to say, the removal of a directly elected mayor is serious business, and they would need to be stateable grounds. Misbehaviour, physical or mental incapacity, a major failure to perform functions. Given the enormous democratic mandate that the Dublin DEM would have, removal or recall initiatives would need to be based on very strong grounds. The threshold has to be high to rule out vexatious or politically motivated resolutions to remove the mayor. The government plans in 2019 said that if the elected council voted on the removal of the DEM, the councillors could not trigger another such vote again within a 6-month period. So you could not keep doing it every month. In terms of the recall petition or plebiscite options, the proposal said this could only be done once during the term of office of the DEM. So those are things to consider as well. We're focusing here, I suppose, on getting rid of the mayor, so to speak, but what about getting on the ballot paper to begin with? In my view, you don't really need to reinvent the wheel here. The policy document of 2019 proposed, and I quote, "The nomination process for a candidate to run in the election for a directly elected mayor should be aligned with that of the nomination process for a candidate for Dáil Éireann." So, if that was the case, you would be looking at being a citizen of Ireland and over the age of 21. You could, of course, be nominated through a political party process or stand as an independent. It is worth noting that you as an assembly might not want to align the nomination process with that of Dáil Éireann. If you were to align it to the process of becoming a councillor, the age threshold drops to 18 and you do not have to be an Irish citizen. These two options are not exhaustive, and of course you might wish to consider other nomination criteria. Now let me throw a spanner into the works if you don't mind. I think the 2019 policy proposal that a DEM would have to be an Irish citizen is not legal. Under the Maastricht Treaty, which we have signed up and ratified under Article 8, local election candidates cannot be restricted to being citizens of the country in question. So we might need legal advice on this one, but the election of a DEM is surely regarded as a local subnational election rather than a national election. And if it's a local election, you cannot insist that candidates are Irish citizens based on the Maastricht Treaty. As well as not being a legal expert, I'm far from being an expert on finance, and you've heard from eminent people such as Dr. Teresa Reedy. It's hardly earth-shattering to say that the office of DEM will only be successful if it is well-resourced, particularly, as Breed was saying, if you're getting a devolution of powers, obviously you need the money as well. So, to the thorny question of who pays, central government, of course, should pay some, but the local government financing model in Dublin will need to move towards locally based, autonomous sources of funding. There is an obvious danger if central government is the dominant funder. He who pays the piper calls the tune. I would rather that to be the local electorate than central government. We may not need to drill down into specific options, but the Limerick Implementation Advisory Group recommended a combination of multi-annual block grants from central government plus revenue raised locally, primarily through commercial rates, the local property tax and local charges. It also recommended decentralised power for borrowing to be assigned to the DEM and a special sub-fund of the Irish Strategic Investment Fund to be made available to the DEM. There are a myriad of options such as sales taxes, hotel taxes, Dublin to retain its own property and motor tax revenues. The one guiding principle, I think, is that financial autonomy is at the heart of successful local government. Budget, of course, will inevitably be linked to structure and powers. If the DEM is dealing with big-ticket policy items across Dublin City and County, the budget will have to reflect this reality. The major portion of what we might call the Dublin local government budget should ideally go to the office of the DEM and flow downwards from there, depending, of course, again, on the structures underneath. As part of your deliberations, I feel it is also desirable that you might end up with recommendations to enhance the role of local councillors. Based on what the government ultimately decides to do, Dublin could end up with more councillors or fewer councillors. It depends, of course, on what the final model looks like. But we do know a few things. Councillors are not particularly well remunerated for the work that they do. Comparatively, there are very few of them, and Dublin City in particular is grossly underrepresented given the size of the population it serves. The review by Senior Counsel Sarah Moorhead pointed out that councillors need administrative support, induction, ongoing training, etc. There may be a need for us to consider, or for you to consider, to have different kinds of councillors. The directly elected mayor will be a full-time position, but should this also be the case for other councillors? The term cabinet has cropped up a few times in your discussions. Is there an argument that cabinet members supporting the DEM and engaged in policy should be full-time, while councillors at a lower level involved in constituency work more than policy might retain their part-time status? Again, these are things for you to ponder and make recommendations on. At the end of the process, local government in Dublin must be better than it is now, and it cannot all be about a directly elected mayor. The goal is to improve the quality of life and service provision for all of those people in the nation's capital, city and county. The frustration, of course, and the chairman went into detail about the process that will flow after you submit a report, the frustration is not being in control of our own destiny. Your final recommendations will inform, enlighten and hopefully persuade government. Legislation might be produced in any given year to introduce a DEM in Dublin, and that legislation could be repealed not long after. We have history in this regard with the Local Government Act of 2001 being reversed in 2003. If we do not wish for this to happen again, maybe you also need not only to come up with a structure, but think about how to protect that structure. And the obvious way is to embed it in Bunrock na hÉireann. Thank you very much, and good luck for your deliberations.